Ash Wednesday is a strange day upon which to be a Protestant. At least I think so, and I can only speak for myself. And I should say I do think of myself as a Protestant, albeit a peculiar Anglican one. Anglicanism, Episcopalianism, as you probably know, is something of an ecclesiastical mutt. Half Catholic, half Reformed. Maybe it's a different ratio depending on the Anglican you ask. That mix of Catholic and Reformed identity I know is alive in me. On the one hand, I have what you might call a Catholic obsession with and appreciation of tradition, of rituals, of rites that connect me to my ancestors in faith, of sacramental objects. I love the sensory, material trappings of our tradition, the vestments, the candles, the organ, the choirs, the incense. But at the same time, I also find within myself what you might call a Protestant neurosis or anxiety about keeping the main thing the main thing. I worry sometimes that my obsession with the outward material forms of sacramental worship is at times in my own life a distraction from my actual faith in God. I'll give you a really specific example of this dynamic in my life. On this penitential day, I will confess to you fairly candidly that regularly, as a spiritual discipline in my priesthood, I have to ask myself this question: do I enjoy wearing this stole because it helps me connect to God and to the tradition that I represent? Or do I enjoy wearing it because I think it makes me look cool? I'll be very honest with you. On my best days, the answer is the former. On my worst days, my answer is the latter. And on most days, it's a mix of both things. Outward, material, sensory piety, stuff like candles and incense and vestments, all those things have this amazing potential to spread the good news to us, to connect us to God. And they also have the power to inflate our egos and to distract us from God. This is really a species, I should say, of a more fundamental tension of Christian faith. We find ourselves in a world that's full of stuff, and it's a very biblical conviction that all of that stuff can teach us something about God. The Psalms are full of language that attests to this, right? The heavens declare the glory of God. There's this notion that the things in the universe can speak of God to us. But of course, if we get too obsessed with the things, we lose sight of God and run the risk of falling into idolatry. And so many of the debates that informed the Protestant Reformation had to do with how people negotiated this tension. And different people had different answers. What do we do with the world in which we live, with the symbols of which it is full, with the things that speak God to us and yet also distract us from God? Okay, that leads me back to Ash Wednesday, a day upon which it is a very strange thing to be a Protestant with a Catholic sacramental sensibility. Today is a day upon which we engage with sensory, material, visible piety. A day upon which we're urged also to be wary of it. It's both of those things. In Matthew 6, in our gospel reading today, Jesus says, "Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward in heaven." Stark warning. And yet on Ash Wednesday, not only do we read that quote from Matthew 6, but then we go on to engage in one of the most public acts of piety in the Western church. We smear ashes on our faces, and then we leave and walk around outside where other people can see that we went to church and smeared ashes on our faces, even though in Matthew 6, which we just read, Jesus states pretty clearly that that might be a spiritually risky thing to do. It's kind of absurd. And I think that there's a sort of humor and beauty in that absurdity, in that tension. But there's a challenge too. Having that gospel reading right next to this spiritual practice that we're about to share in together forces us to look inward. We all have to receive these ashes and ask ourselves a question similar to the one I have to ask myself about my stole. The question is this: why am I doing this? Am I engaging in this practice so that others will see something in me? Or am I engaging in this practice because I am trying to see something of God in my world? The Protestant tradition, historically, has had a lot of anxiety about this question. And I should say that Anglicans have not always done ashes on Ash Wednesday. That's a recent ressourcement from the Catholic tradition. But in the early days of our tradition, the Reformers thought, you know what, we should probably do away with the ashes because they're distracting, they might make people superstitious. Same as with stuff like the sign of the cross, as you might know. Or with vestments. Anglican priests didn't always dress like I do now. But I wonder if the Protestant tradition has actually overcorrected, or back then overcorrected somewhat. I think that if there's a problem with our material piety, if there's arrogance in it, or distraction in it, or idolatry in it, that's not the ashes' fault. It's ours. When it comes to sacramental material piety, spirituality that has to do with the stuff of the world, our intentions matter intensely. And if we approach material things with the right intention, they will speak to us about God. They will speak to us about the truth of who we are. And God will speak to us through them, if only we let our egos get out of the way. Our collect for Ash Wednesday includes this wonderful phrase, "Oh God, you hate nothing that you have made." That's not just a line from the prayer book, it's a line from the Bible, from the Wisdom of Solomon. God hates nothing God has made. And I think about that when I think about the world, when I think about the stuff of which the world is full. God does not hate the wood that became this pulpit or the columns around our altar. God does not hate the stone that became our altar itself. God doesn't hate the silkworm nor her silk that became our vestments. God doesn't hate the flax that got turned into our altar linens. God doesn't hate the palm branches that we burned yesterday to make ashes to smear on our faces today. God does not hate the bees, nor does God hate the wax that they make, the wax that becomes the sacrifice of our candles on our altar and on our torches. All things are part of God's good, beloved creation. And all things have the power to speak of God and to praise him, same as the trees and the rivers do in the Psalms. But will we listen to their voices? Will we let our egoic distractions fall away and listen to the voices of creation? May Jesus help us to do so. May he empower us to receive these ashes with open minds and hearts, that we might hear the voice of the ashes, that they might tell us who we are, that Jesus might love us through them.